Much for coming to join us here at McNally-Jackson, Williamsburg for tonight's event. It's going to be a great talk and reading that we have lined up for you. Just before we begin, I have a couple announcements. The store is open until 10 o'clock this evening if you'd like to stick around, hang out after the event. The restroom is downstairs. If you need to use it at any point, just go up to the front desk and ask for the key. I think for announcements, that's all I've got. So tonight we are here to talk about For What It's Worth, a new novel by Thorsten Nagelschmidt. Thorsten Nagelschmidt was born in 1976 in West Germany, and he is an author, a musician, and an artist. Until 2009, he was the singer, lyricist, and guitarist of the band Muff Potter. He has had 3 novels and a collection of stories and photographs published. Most recently, Der Abfall der Herzen, published by S. Fischer Verlag in 2018. Nagelschmidt lives in Berlin. Joining him in conversation will be Tim DeMarco, who is a teacher, translator, and writer. He earned his bachelor's degree from Georgetown University and his master's from Middlebury College. He currently lives in New Jersey. And rounding out the crew tonight will be Nicolaia, who is a student at Brown University. Her first book, Trying to Float, was published by Scribner's in 2016 and won the ILA Children's and Young Adults Book Award. She is currently the co-editor-in-chief of the Irregular Report's upcoming issue and is writing a play on the relationship between Paul Celan and Heidegger. You can follow her on Instagram at @nribs. So please join me in welcoming Thorsten Nagelschmidt, Tim DeMarco, and Nicolaia Ribs.
Take this one. Okay. 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 Yeah. Hello.
Hi.
This is the first night of our tour, and it's the first time, my first reading outside of German-speaking countries. So I'm very excited and very happy you're here.
Woo. Thank you. So I'm just going to say how I met Thorsten, and that was 2 years ago when I was doing a little tour, and I was lucky enough to read on his show, and it was in a bar in Berlin at midnight, and I was 18, and I had decided to read a story about potty training to a bar full of punk rock German people who did not understand what I was saying. And I had one friend there who spoke English, and who's here now, thank you, Lena, and she was like cracking up, and it was such a wonderful experience, and Thorsten was like an incredible host, and I feel so lucky that I get to be here and witness your first reading, because that was my first reading. And
cool, yeah, thanks that you...
And I wanted to, yeah, of course. And I know that I wanted to know how you two got acquainted and started this translation process.
You?
Okay, yeah. So I grew up in New Jersey, but I studied German. And my first year living in Germany, I met a bunch of German punks, and I've always been into punk music. And they introduced me to a band called Muff Potter, which I really became, a big fan of. And I found out later that this singer started writing books, and I started reading the books. And I've always been interested in translating, and one day I decided, if I'm going to translate, I should translate something that I enjoy. So I started translating the beginning of his, the first chapter of each of his novels and one of his stories. And I sent an email to him one night and figured, we'll see. The worst thing that happens is I don't get an answer. And I woke up the next morning, and I got a pretty enthusiastic email saying, yeah, let's do it. Come on, awesome. And that was 2016, and it's been 3 years.
I wanted to shut down my computer and go to bed because it was 2 in the morning in Berlin, and then there was this mail here, and you attached those 3 chapters. Mm-hmm. And of course, I couldn't go to sleep. I had to read them, so that took me, I don't know, and I was like, wow, someone translated my work. I don't know him, and what, is he crazy?
Maybe, just a little. And so I started working on it, and we decided to translate Let's Cross the Up, or For What It's Worth. We decided on this book, and I translated in about 6 months, and just at the time I'd finished translating it, the first draft, it was the summertime, and I usually go to Germany anyway, and I met up with Thorsten in Berlin, and we talked about it, and we got along pretty well, I would say. And over a couple glasses of wine, a few, we talked about the book, and we decided, let's do it. And then from there on out, it was a matter of fine-tuning and finding a publisher. So, and
Fine-tuning was easy.
Fine-tuning was easy. Finding a publisher was, not my favorite part of the process, but I think the first time's probably always the hardest. So your next book I translate will be easier, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you have any issues in translation?
Issues, I wouldn't say, like, there were some definite interesting situations where, I mean, linguistically, obviously, you can't translate word for word, or you lose everything. And there's a lot of cultural references that we had discussions where we couldn't keep the original because no American audience would recognize it. And if I put an American name in it, Thorsten didn't necessarily recognize it, and we thought we might be losing something. So it was a back and forth process that we found a good balance.
I was always trying to encourage you not to stick too close to the original because, you know, I mean, being a German, I read a lot more. I mean, there's a lot more English books being translated into German than the other way around, obviously. So I'm quite used to read translated books, and I always, I don't like it if I see that it's a translation. I want to forget that it's a translation. That's when the translation is really good, I think.
I think one thing I want to say about the process, which I don't know if this is, I feel like it's pretty unique. I would translate a chapter and then share it, and Thorsten would read through it and say, looks great, or maybe we can change this. So, I mean, I translated the book, but it wasn't 100% me. I mean, there was a lot of input from the author, and sometimes I wonder with translations if Thorsten has a pretty good grasp on the English language, which helps because if somebody translated your book into Swedish, would you know if it was a good translation or not?
Oh, that would be amazing.
Right? Okay, well, that's the next step, but I think that helped a lot.
I always thought that would be the most amazing. I mean, of course, every writer wants their novel to be turned into a movie because that's where you make some money and stuff. But I think what would be most amazing is to be translated into a language that you don't speak. You know, you don't understand the language. You know, you have a book and it's your ideas and it's your words in a way, but you are not able to understand them when you open the book. That's an amazing thought, I think.
You see, I don't speak any other languages, so it's simply, that just happens. It's stupidity on my part, that I can't understand it.
I wouldn't say stupidity. Yeah.
I know there's so much like American culture I felt in the novel. What's your relationship to Americana?
Well, I come from a working class family and we didn't travel much. My parents don't speak any other language and they don't, travel to foreign countries or so. So I started quite late traveling and everything, but of course I grew up with like American culture, pop culture mostly. I listened to the music, I saw all the movies, and then I got interested in literature. So that's in Germany. I think that's we have a strong connection to, for example, New York, because we've seen all the movies and everything. And I started teaching myself English when I was in 3rd grade. For us, English lessons start in 5th grade, and because I wanted to, there was a magazine, like a youth culture magazine, and they had every week they had lyrics to a song and the German translation next to it, and I tried to learn English with that, and that was pretty interesting.
Were the translations good?
I thought they were good, but I mean, I was really amazed. There was a song by the band T-Pow. Do you remember T-Pow? They had the song "China in Your Hands," and the German said fragile, zerbrechlich, fragile. And I thought, wow, that's a complicated language. And what has China to do with it? Of course, I didn't know what China was, except for a country. And so, yeah, that was quite interesting.
I think on the topic of music, you're a musician, you're a writer, you're an artist, you do so many things. How does music affect how you're writing? And vice versa?
I don't know. I mean, the easy answer would be that you have maybe have some sense of rhythm and sound, but I don't really know if that's true, if that really has something to do with it, because it's really different things. I mean, I'm interested, I was also the lyricist for my band, so I'm really interested in language and what you can do with language, how you can play around with language, and but I wouldn't overrate that.
I'll make a note of that next time I'm trying to juggle both. So your main character, Misa, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah.
There are many jokes about how his name sounds sort of like miser, and your entire book is about this character spending his inheritance on traveling and what the right way to spend money is. And it's this complicated relationship with both money and the father and travel. Would you speak a little bit about any of those themes?
Yeah, that wasn't my intention, of course, because I didn't know that. He's called Meise in the book because it's his nickname. It's from his last name, Meisner, and he's being called Meise, like me. And my last name is Nagelschmidt. I was called Nagel all the time, but it's not me. Like the guy in the book is not me, but yeah.
Well, it's a translation question. I think if I can add to that, it was one of the challenges when it comes to translation is that the main character's name itself is a part of, like you said, a lot of commentary, because in German, Meise, every time he introduces himself, everyone's like, that's kind of a weird name, hast du eine Meise, which basically means like, do you have a screws? Are you like not all together? And you can't translate that perfectly into English. It wouldn't work. So
they could have called him Screwy.
Screwy, yeah. I guess I should have changed it to Screwy, but I didn't want to change it. You know, Thorsten kept pushing me to be free with the translation, but some of the things I didn't want to translate were names. I feel like changing a name would be weird. So I thought the best thing I could do is find some kind of play on words that sounds close enough. And because, like you said, the book has a lot to do with spending money, or how you should or shouldn't spend money, or whether you should save or whether you should spend, I thought that could work. And at first I wasn't too sold on that translation, but when I think about it, I think it works. I would agree.
And I also know that much of the book is set in the Mosel, is that how I'm pronouncing it?
Yeah.
Mosel Valley in Germany, and I wanted to know, why did you choose this?
Well, the Mosel Valley is in the far west of Germany, and my character, Meise, he's born in Berlin, in East Berlin, when there was still a wall separating the city in two halves. And I don't come from the Mosel Valley, but I come from the west and moved to Berlin, so I thought it might be interesting to play with that, but the other way around, like someone who comes. Because he traveled, the thing with Meise is his father died and he got 15,000 euros, and he didn't get along well with his father, so he thought, I don't want that money, it's kind of like blood money, and I want to spend it like he never did. I want to travel, because he never traveled. And but Meise didn't travel in Germany, and Berlin is very much different from the rest. I guess like New York is different from the rest of the USA, Berlin is very much different from the rest of Germany. So I wanted him, because when he comes back from all those travels, he still has about 1,000 euros left, and he doesn't feel well, because he didn't spend all the money, so he decides to go on a last trip to the Mosel Valley, because he met a couple from there, met them in New York actually, in the book. And what was I going to say?
Why Mosel Valley of all places, right?
Yeah, what interested me was this culture clash, also with his family issues that he had. He comes from a broken family, and he comes into this family which is very nice to him, and they all get along well together, which is something completely strange to him, and he doesn't trust the whole piece. And also the Mosel Valley is kind of like very conservative too, different from Berlin. And so he has a bigger culture clash going from Berlin to the west of Germany than he had going from Berlin to New York or to, I don't know, Barcelona or wherever.
Did you relate to this, being an American, and what with the divided times we're having?
Yeah, so I mean, when I started translating, I obviously was a little bit different. So that was one of the things that we talked about. Translating language is one thing, but then there's the cultural translation, which is a whole different topic. And when we first started talking, I said, okay, I can get behind the idea of big city, which is not, representative of the entire country. So I said, okay, the Mosel Valley to me is kind of like maybe like the Midwest, where the family that Maisa visits is super hospitable, super friendly. He has nothing bad to say about them as people, but it's just very different from what he knows, and very job-oriented, career-oriented, family-oriented, set in their ways. And so I thought, okay, it's kind of like, almost like the Midwest, and we try to talk about which region of the U.S. I can base my interpretation, understanding of. So we picked that, and I also did say at one point maybe like a Ned Flanders kind of way of talking, where it's a super friendly but so foreign, just such a different lifestyle.
You will hear in the first chapter, I think.
We'll see some of that in something that we'll read, definitely. But yeah, I think it was, the idea is not specifically German. I think in really any country or any culture, you have the metropolis, and people live in one way, and then further out in the country, it's a whole different lifestyle, although it's the same country.
Mm-hmm. So really a relatable book.
For me, actually, it was a coincidence, because I knew that I wanted to. It's my second novel. I wrote 4 novels, but this one is the second one that was translated now. And after my first novel, I kind of knew what topics I wanted to talk about, and like family, a broken family, all the things that you already mentioned, like spending money and a weird relationship to money. And all these things, but I didn't know where to put it, So, and then I was on a tour playing music, and I came to the Mosel Valley, and these people from a vineyard invited me, and I thought, wow, it wasn't even an intellectual thing. I just felt it. Like, wow, this is where, because I really wanted my hero to fail, and he really fails in the book, and so I thought, like, wow, this would be the perfect place for him to be completely lost and stranded, Not because I didn't like it. I did reading tours in Germany, and I did readings in the Mosel Valley, and luckily enough, people have humor there, so they could dig it. But I was writing the book, and the Mosel Valley is really, really beautiful, and Berlin in winter can be really, really harsh and ugly. And I was writing, I remember sitting there in January and writing this book. I had been working on it for a year or so, and I couldn't stand this guy anymore, my eye narrator. And he was talking so badly about this beautiful Mosel Valley and this nice family, and I hate you, stop. But I thought, if I have such strong feelings, that must be something good in this case.
You were going to say something, I think?
Well, no, maybe, but I forgot. But going along with that, I think that's another reason, asking about how I got started with this project was, obviously, there's a lot of books that I've read in German that I would love to see in English, and this book I read, and I remember being so, I don't know what the word is, I don't know if it's bothered, but it stuck with me. I read it, and I enjoyed it, and it kind of like bothered me a little bit, and then like months later I kept thinking about it. I'm like, well, why do I keep thinking about it? Like, why am I bothered? And I was like, you know what? Maybe because that main character, everything about him, where Thorsten said like he wanted him to fail and he fails, everything about it, it's so human, and all of his mistakes or shortcomings, I was like, well, I can see that. It's so human, and I feel like so many times when you read a book, like you have sympathy or empathy with the main character, and with this character, you don't necessarily feel that, but when you're all done, you're like, I get it. I have a connection somehow with him, and so I think that's another reason why I was drawn to translating this book of all, because it stuck with me.
Yeah, his capacity to be miserable in so many different places
really
struck a chord. He's traveling all over, and still.
I mean, there's that something there's the constant talk of heavy shoulders. That's something that's kind of that's weighing on him the whole time, and that really kind of fascinated me. And when I was done the book, I kept thinking about it, so that was enough to keep me motivated.
Oh, and I think, are we gonna hear a reading?
If you want.
I want, yeah.
If you want, crowd.
Okay. So do we just
I will only do short.
the I see what we decide, right? So just a brief introduction for those of you who might not be familiar with the novel. Obviously, the main character, Maisa, spends his last 958 euros and 50 cents to go to the Moselle Valley, and he's trying to get rid of that last bit of inheritance, and he winds up with a super hospitable, friendly family, the Arends. And this particular scene is when Maisa arrives there. It's the second day. The first night he does a wine tasting in the basement, drinks a decent amount. It's still kind of, you can't say jet lagged, it's still kind of getting his bearings in this area. And the next morning he's invited to lunch, to sit down lunch with the family, which is a really foreign concept to him because he never ate with his family. He's from a family, more of a broken family. So he's uncomfortable as it is. He's in new territory, sitting with a family and eating. And as you read it, you kind of get to feel he's very monosyllabic, really just one word answers, not really.
Yeah, but he has a very strong opinion on everything.
Exactly.
But he just doesn't let it out.
So one thing I do want to say, in the novel, there's a different font used because Maisa doesn't speak a whole ton throughout the book. He has a lot to say, and there's a lot of inner monologue, which is written in a different font, which also I thought was really interesting because you can really see everything he wants to say but doesn't say is expressed, but in the background. So all the other characters in the novel aren't getting that. They're just seeing the surface Maisa.
Yeah.
All right, so
I'll be the miser, but not his thoughts, only his dialogue.
I kicked my shoes off onto the foot mat with the inscription VIP Lounge. Junior bought that, says Hubert, looking at the mat. Why am I not surprised? I follow him into the house where it already smells like lunch. History, too. Like 500 years of family history. We reach the dining room after walking past a ton of awards and ancestral portraits, deer antlers, spanning the entire length of the hallway. Hubert and I take a seat. Flo and his mother bring in the plates and bowls. There's homemade meatloaf, brown sauce, potatoes, peas, and carrots. And here we go. I'm a vegetarian, but I don't really like saying that when I'm eating with strangers. You always want to talk about it. Usually they say things like, oh, how interesting, or I think that's great. And it's almost always followed up with, I could never do it. That being said, I really couldn't care less if someone eats meat or not. Trying to convert someone is the furthest thing from my mind. I went through that phase when I was 16, and I was over it by the time I was 16 and a half. But since meat eaters always want to explain or justify themselves, I usually just keep quiet and hope that no one notices. Obviously, that's not going to work in this Hunter household. To spurn Mrs. Arendt's meatloaf is probably just as insulting as uncorking a bottle of Peter Merton's Liebfrauenmilch at the table. Okay now, Mom, give the boy some meatloaf, says Hubert. He really doesn't want any, says Mrs. Arendt. Really?
No, thanks.
It's delicious.
I believe you.
You need to put some meat on those bones.
Yeah, well, I don't eat meat.
No meat? Hubert asks as he looks at me.
No.
And fish?
No.
Gotcha. Do you know vegetarian is Hindu for bad hunter? Dad, says Flo. Well, take it or leave it, but before it goes to waste. Here, Dad, said Mrs. Aaron and hands him the plate of meatloaf. Then she turns to me. A little sauce, Mr. Miser?
No, thanks.
You gotta put sauce on the potatoes. They're too dry if you don't, Hubert calls out, still chewing. Besides, you eat with your eyes first, his wife concurs.
Well, all right, thanks.
She pours the sauce over my mashed potatoes. I have to admit, not only do they taste better, but they also look better on the plate. Judith's unfortunately not going to make it to lunch. She's still in Trier, Flo says to me. By now I've learned the reaction is expected.
In Trier?
Yeah, at the university.
Oh.
Leisure and tours of geography. She has one lecture today. She should be back any minute now. Then we can head right out on a little cruise if you'd like. Ha! Cruise, good one, Hubert says. Look outside, it's coming down in buckets. He's right. The sky looks like someone was handed pen and paper and told, draw rain. I have no idea what leisure and tourism geography is. It sounds mind-numbingly boring, so it's better not to even ask. I also don't get how a couple can call each other mom and dad, and it irritates me to be called Mr. by one parent and boy by the other. But at least there's no long discussion about a meatless diet, and no prayer before the meal. That wouldn't have surprised me. Mrs. Aaron scoops me another serving of peas and carrots. And what's life like as a young bachelor in Berlin? To turn on the stove every once in a while? Or is it just takeout every night?
A little bit of both.
Mrs. Aaron nods, content with the answer, and it seems like the talk of my eating habits is finally a thing of the past. So then why do I decide to bring it back up?
It's like this. I can cook really well, just nobody can eat it.
I really have no idea what compelled me to tell my father's only joke. I feel like I'm strutting around in borrowed plumes. Plumes that don't even fit me. But I enjoy the applause like a refreshing shower. Everyone laughs. I laugh too. But I think I even see Hubert nodding approvingly, as if he was not only surprised, but also proud of me. Just nobody can eat it. Not bad. Maybe he just accepted me into his jokester world. He's probably going to give me his hand, and he's going to probably hand me his praise monger diploma any minute now. So, do you like it out here in the country?
Yeah, it's nice.
It's different than Berlin, eh? And prettier. I mean, I don't understand how you can live in a city. It's way too loud for me.
Well, there are some quieter parts.
And you met my son in New York?
Yeah, exactly.
Were you also on vacation?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we've only made it over the Great Pond once. How long was that ago, Dad? Oh, let me lie, 10 years? This summer it's going to be vacation on Balconia, Hubert laughs. Or a lake at my garden. It's nice there, too. Everyone laughs. And you, Mr. Miser? Does your work let you travel?
Yeah.
What do you do for a living, if I may ask?
Well, you know, this and that.
Well, you gotta make a living doing something.
I work at a bar.
At a bar?
Yeah.
Like a restaurant bar?
No, more like a bar.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And you can make a living doing that?
Yeah, actually, yeah.
So I take it in the capital, you can make ends meet doing that. But it's not really a solid career, right?
Well, it works.
How old are you?
27.
And do you really want to spend your whole life standing behind a tap? Don't you want to, I don't know, feel like you've achieved something? For the life of me, I can't come up with an answer. But before I can even embarrass myself by answering with a curt nah, or by saying, for me, getting people drunk is the greatest achievement, Mrs. Aaron strikes again. Did you go to college for anything?
I started going to college, but it wasn't really my thing.
Well, it's like they say, those who can do, those who can't bartend, says Hubert. Dad! Flo yells. What? I'm just saying, like I always say, let the young people be. Sooner or later they'll find out you can't just float along your whole life, right, Junior? Hubert ruffles Flo's hair. Dad! A bird comes flying out of a clock on the wall. Cuckoo! Cuckoo! 2 o'clock already. We're running late today, Hubert says, looking out in the yard. My, oh my, it's raining cats and dogs. The weather's not fit for man or beast. Well, makes a difference anyway. Nothing comes from nothing, eh?
I'm gonna go step outside for a minute.
Gonna go have a smoke?
Yeah.
A cigarette a day keeps the doctor with pay. A coffin nail, says Flu. A lung dart, says Hubert. A cancer stick. They both laugh. Oh, my boys, you guys are a pack of wackies, says Mrs. Aaron, and starts clearing the table. Better a pack of wackies than a wacky packy, says Hubert. Dad, says Flo.
Sorry, I gotta explain, I'm not laughing at my own work, I'm laughing about the nice translation, because that wasn't, I mean, it sounds even crazier in English to me.
Which what?
Yeah, I mean, it was, do you remember us talking about these?
Wacky-packies.
Yeah, I mean,
that was
in the original it's
an alberner Haufen.
lieber ein alberner Haufen als ein Haufen Albaner. It's kind of like a racist joke, but you can tell that people who tell that joke aren't necessarily racist. They don't mean to be racist. They just have a very bad sense of humor. So I try to explain this to Tim, and like in a Google Doc, and can you find something for that? And I don't know. At some point you came up with.
Well, that was the first thing, because when I first decided to translate the novel, it was probably 2 years after I read it, and Thorsten said, "Yeah, but there's a lot of like idioms or all different sayings. It's going to be really hard." And like they weren't fresh in my memory. It's like, I got this, no problem. And then I flipped through the book, and that was the first thing I saw. And I was like, okay, all right, this is going to be challenging. And I came up with what I thought was a pretty good translation. And I wrote to him. I was like, I got this. We can do a pack of wackies better than a wacky packy or something. And we laughed and said, oh, this is great. And I thought this would be easy.
It's real creative work.
And I'm proud of that one. And then I started translating the book, and I was like, man, there's a lot of other ones that I just can't do justice to. That was the first one I saw. I think I did a good job with. The rest of them, I struggled a little bit more. But
I feel like there's like pages of them. Like I remember an entire scene where they're just listing off idioms.
I mean, the idea was, it was kind of, there was even more before there was an editor coming in. But the idea behind it was, it's funny, but okay, then it got too funny, so I had to throw some of them out. But the idea was that I wanted people to how do you say, reveal themselves through their language. I didn't want to waste a lot of time with explaining the characters or what they looked like or whatever. I mean, there's parts of that in there, but I wanted to all be there in the dialogue and in this famous saying, I don't know, was it Hemingway's, with the tip of the iceberg, and by the way how they talk, you get the whole iceberg, but you only see the very tip of it. And when Tim said, hey, let's do this book, and I thought, like, wow, you really picked the most complicated ones. The other ones would have been a lot easier, in a way, I guess.
I think I said it to you when I translated the first chapter of each in that one story. I think I enjoyed this one the most, and I remember saying to you, I spent more time translating this, and I struggled more with it, but maybe that was part of the intrigue. It was like,
well, it's so interesting.
Yeah.
I feel like you play with language so many times, like in that one sort of chapter where it's like one sentence.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If we have the time, I can do it later.
Okay, later. No, but that must have been challenging.
No, it was, and so some of them, I mean, any language is super creative with any of the sayings. So I found a lot of equivalents, and for the most part it's pretty easy, but there were some where a certain word was like the key to a conversation, and that was turned to a saying, and that's tricky. So I found some ones that worked. For example, I think when Flo is pouring wine, he uses some kind of saying that has to do with wine, and I couldn't find a similar one, but I used like the, in vino veritas, which not English, but it's commonly used. At least it worked. It was a different saying, but it kind of has the same idea. It's about wine, and it's talking about Miser opening up because he's been drinking. So certain things like that worked well. Other ones we just there were a few times we just said like, let's just leave it out, or let's just come up with something completely different but kind of fun. And we had some fun with those situations.
What you said before, you said you didn't want it to be too funny.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do a lot of readings in Germany, and I know which parts work on a stage.
Huh.
And that can also, when writing, can be tricky, because I think a lot of things that work on a stage don't work in a book, and if it gets hilarious, then that's not what I want to do, because this is, I mean, there's funny parts in this novel, but it's serious topics, and it you know, this, well, I guess like a lot of us, also, of course, because you asked, I grew up with all the Woody Allen and all that stuff, you know, and my favorite parts of movies were also always those where you had to laugh and then something dramatic happened and you hadn't finished laughing, and so that's what I wanted to achieve. So sometimes it's not so hard. I don't know how it is with you, but it's not so hard to write, I think. But it's really hard to edit and to take a step back and look at it if it makes sense in the structure.
I find it's hard to write something good. It's my personal struggle. But I think that's very interesting, because, so do you find that when you're writing you're also thinking about performing it?
Yeah, I try to not, I don't want to do it, but I have to remind myself to not do it, yeah.
Wow. That's, you mentioned Woody Allen. Who else are your literary inspirations? German, American?
That's one of those questions that I can't answer now, but it will be stuck in my head for the whole night, and then I will, at some point this night, 2 in the morning, I will run back to McNally-Jackson, because I have the perfect answer. Nobody will be
We'll
here.
be here tomorrow at 7 o'clock doing the same thing, and you can answer the question then.
I should have said it a week ago. I didn't know this would be the stumper.
Well, yeah, really a lot. I mean,
yeah.
I started, like as I said, in my family there were 5 books maybe. My parents didn't read, and so I started reading quite late. My approach to language was really song lyrics. It was really music, and so I started in my early 20s. I started reading, and I knew that I was later than everyone else, that there were so many things that I didn't know that I should know, and I still try to keep up, and I know that I won't be able to. There's just too many great books out there, but I try to read as many of them as possible in my lifetime. And I think there's a lot of good writers and books out there.
Wow.
It doesn't, that's...
There's always a struggle to catch up. That's interesting. I feel like if anything, I've slowed down in my reading as I've gotten older. Maybe you'll beat me.
How do you mean?
In reading whatever you feel like you can't, what time you've missed.
Okay. No.
I think you're also, I think you had a lot of other things on your plate as a college student, and then you have a little more free time, I'm sure to come back to, but I think we have the luxury of not having to read. I feel like you're probably overwhelmed by things you have to read, so I think that's why.
But also, like we were talking about where you live or what you're doing at the moment. You said you're in Providence, and the first thing I thought about was Jeffrey Eugenides, because I love Middlesex. I love that book, and I love other books of him too. But yeah, this is my. If you would mention a few names of cities, I could come up with writers that I admire, I think.
Boston? It's your next stop, right? On the tour?
Dinosaur Jr., does that count?
Yeah, that counts.
Any audience members got a city? Wow.
St. Louis.
Ooh, St. Louis.
St. Louis. I was at Strand today, and which one of the Tennessee Williams plays is set in St. Louis?
That's impressive.
I don't know which one it was, but that's the one I did not buy because
Just saying Tennessee Williams was enough.
Okay.
You didn't even need to get the part of that.
Going back.
But I mistaken. I wanted to ask if they had a plays section, and for some reason I asked one of the staff, do you have any screenplays by Tennessee Williams? And he looked at me like, screenplay? No, plays, I mean. He thought I was an idiot.
What about Berlin?
Berlin writers, you mean? Oh, there's a few. There's one called Jörg Fauser. He's already dead and he was never translated, I guess. I mean, it's very hard for a German writer to be translated into English because the English-speaking world is so big and you don't really need us. So there's two ways. Either you have a very specific topic or a huge bestseller. But there's two books. Sometimes I have some friends in the UK and I want to give them books, and there's two that I can recommend. One is called Chick by Wolfgang Herrndorf. In the English is Why We Took the Car. And then there's one by Sven Regner called Herr Lehmann in German, and in English it's called Berlin Blues. If there's books that have to do with Berlin, that no matter what title they have in the original, they always try to get Berlin into the English title. I guess that sells.
Oh, Babylon Berlin.
Yeah.
It's a good TV show. Going back briefly to your book, you mentioned this complicated relationship between the protagonist and his father and his parents. Did you draw from life on that, or I know that's kind of a pointed.
Yeah, well, I did, I guess, yeah, but it's not my family there, but yeah, I mean, as a writer, that's the fun part of writing too, is like you're so free to exaggerate everything and, and leave something out, and yeah, but yeah, there's a few things that are inspired by real life, and I don't mind this question. All those writers that always complain about, of course, I think Joan Didion said that, I don't know how the English phrase it, but that a writer always liefert jemand ans Messer.
Deliver someone to the knife. I don't know. That's a word-for-word translation.
Yeah, they always exploit people that they know. That's a famous quote by Joan Didion, and that's true. I mean, I'm working on a new novel now, and everything. I stand on the street and someone's walking by talking to their cell phone, and I take it. You always. That's what you do.
You take it and then you change their name.
Yeah, or change a lot of things, but yeah.
So you mentioned this new book that you're working on. Can you tell us anything about that?
Yeah, it's set in Berlin. It's not autobiographical.
Autobiographical.
Yeah. And it's about people who work in nightlife in Berlin. But not the DJs and not the club owners. There's so many articles and essays about Berlin being the hip party city and the Berghain and everything. And they always write about the DJs and the club owners, but they never write about really the proletariat, if I may say. People who really work to make all that happen, but they're more in the shadows of the nightlife, work for an ambulance or taxi driver, cab drivers, or drug dealers too. Okay, there's a lot of books about drug dealers. So it's this one night in Berlin through 12 different perspectives.
Huh. You have a great way of managing time for what it's worth. Because it takes place over a relatively small period of time, and yet because you're drawing from all these outside trips that the author took, you pack a lot in.
Thanks.
You're welcome. That was just a comment. I really enjoyed it.
Cool.
And will that be, you think you'll translate that in English?
Yeah, that would be nice to do that, I think. I'll ask Tim if he has time.
Yeah, if there's anyone out there who has a connection to a publisher, let's talk afterwards, and then I'll give you an answer. Because listen, the translating was a fun part. I loved it. I had a great time. I think we worked well together, and everything else was not my favorite. So if any of you were interested in what he just said, let's talk afterwards, and we'll translate it. Deal? Fair enough. Do you want to do the second section, one last reading, or I don't know what we're looking at on
time?
I think one last.
So Thorsten did mention somewhere where he liked balancing the the humor, the Woody Allen effect you were saying, where there's like humor and you're laughing and then you catch yourself and you don't want to laugh. And I think there's a great section where that we're going to read. It's a pretty short section, but like we said, Miza has traveled a lot, and he's reflecting on his travels. And there's one scene where he's thinking about New York City, actually. He's thinking about all the graveyards he's visited throughout the world, and how he's always drawn to the graveyards or cemeteries, and he doesn't really know why, but he always finds himself there. And it also has to do with his father and the inheritance. I think it's a pretty poignant section that balances his party attitude and his kind of careless attitude with the reality of what he's dealing with.
Yeah, and also he traveled with a woman that he's kind of attached to, but he can't, he
Doesn't have the emotional
yeah,
capacity.
he's how do you say?
He's distancing himself from her.
It's freaking him out that she's so close.
And he doesn't necessarily know why, but he constantly goes back to her in a monologue about how great of a woman she is, but he actively keeps himself away from her, and he doesn't necessarily understand it. Correct? He's just it's some kind of dynamic. I think it's maybe because he's still processing everything, or because of his environment or whatever. But yeah, and it references that as well. Oh, it's all me, right?
Yeah, it's all you.
Okay.
I can be back. I shouldn't.
Towards the end of our trip, we were at another cemetery. It was my 27th birthday, exactly 2.5 weeks ago. We sat silently on the grass in the Calvary Cemetery in New York and waited for the hallucinogenic effects of the shrooms to kick in. Brian's birthday present to me. Billions of headstones loomed over us and blended in with the skyscrapers of Manhattan, which soared into the milky sky on the other side of the East River. It was insanely hot and devoid of people. No wonder, since most of the people buried here had been dead for over 50 years or more and were therefore rarely visited. I took a ton of photos that all look like those pictures that show up when you do a Google search for Calvary Cemetery. I leaned back and stared off into nothing. Everything swam together in front of me and grew into an antique city, completely removed from space and time. A combination of headstones and statues whose shape reminded me of a pyramid. I squinted my eyes until I saw the Scorpions pyramid in front of me. The one from the live album cover with the Empire State Building as Klaus Meine standing on the thighs of Rudolf Schenker and Matthias Jabs.
So everyone's familiar with the Scorpions? Yeah, everyone knows the Scorpions, right? It might be our most potent German export besides, musical export besides, I don't know, Kraftwerk and Rammstein.
Rammstein?
Yeah, Rammstein as we say, sounds very German, I think.
We walked back to the car when it started to drizzle, and Verena, who doesn't do anything you can't buy at a liquor store or drugstore, drove us to the children's playground in Williamsburg, where Brian and I finally came face to face with insanity. To this day, I still don't know if the shrooms were artificially cultivated to be that strong, or if I screwed up the dosage. Maybe the city's architecture also had something to do with the effect. In any case, the skyline of Manhattan was still pulsing like some cubist painting in a blast furnace as I sat on the roof in Greenpoint at dawn trying to find the off switch. That's the problem with this stuff. There's no fine-tuning. A little bass here, a little treble there, it's just not possible. You just scarf them down and wait to see what happens, and you just have to deal with that. The next morning, I woke up in a pile of clothes in the living kitchen area. Brian and his roommates, Alex and Maria, were also strewn about in the room, comatose. Verena was the only one awake and made us coffee. She took care of us the whole day, as if she were my mother. I still remember how nice and touching I found that. It was like the first day after getting over the flu, when you still feel weak, but you know the worst part is over and it's going to get better soon. I've only been to the cemetery in Jena where my father is buried twice, at the funeral and a few months afterwards on a cold day in the middle of February. The reason for my visit was a sense of obligation. Sylvia and I had to take care of the headstone. That's just something that's expected of children and heirs. Since Sylvia handled the entire process with the house, I felt responsible for the headstone. I looked at the graves around his. Marble seemed to be the flavor of the month, and so I thought, well, then maybe something made of marble? But I wasn't sure if that was too unoriginal. I asked myself, do you need to have an original grave? The way I see it, you can just get rid of the word original and you'd still have a legitimate question. I'm not religious. My father was just as non-religious, even if the priest claimed the opposite at the funeral. A good Christian, my ass. The sun was shining mildly, but it was ice cold. I stared at the little plot in front of me and tried to feel something powerful. No luck. I just felt insanely lost. Not feeling anything in my shoulders really heavy, which means I did feel something, but only because it was about me. My shoulders got even heavier when I realized that.
Thanks.
I mean, I guess at this point, we can open up if anyone has any questions for Thorsten.
This is more a personal question. You grew up in the West. How old were you when you went to the East? For the first time?
I was born in '76. Unlike my character, he's born in '81, I think. He's younger than me. So I did never go to the East when the wall was still there. So the first time I was in Berlin was in the early '90s when the wall was already down. So I never went to the GDR, but still, I mean, now it's all changing. But back then you could really see the difference between those two cities still. And of course there was, like, in the middle of a city, there was this big stretch of, we call it the Todesstreifen.
Yeah,
I mean, there was a wall.
I mean,
Yeah,
like
there was a wall, and then
no man's
like a
land.
few hundred meters to that, to the left and to the right, was wasteland, and so that's where all the interesting club culture started, because there were all these abandoned buildings and like a lot of space, and just like as if I don't know, the East River wasn't a river, but space.
Any other questions? We can do another. Do you want to do the chapter of one sentence?
Only if I'm not, I mean, if people want me to, I can do it.
I see one nodding head. Is that enough to speak?
I don't know.
3 nodding heads.
I see 3. I mean, that's like
Yeah, should I do one last one? Okay.
a bit of an introduction to what's happening here.
Yeah, we're quite late in the book now, and it's his 4th or 5th day in the Mosel Valley. Seems like 400 or 500 to him. He's really crazy by now, and all this not talking drives him insane. He's like a champagne bottle that's being shaken.
Yeah.
And, yeah. So he gets really drunk at the year's most biggest event, the wine fest, and now he's being introduced to 2 friends of his hosts, and that's what happens to him. Do you want to start and I take over?
Do you want me to start?
Yeah, please.
Okay, wait. Are you just gonna take over when you're ready?
Yeah, I take over here, right?
Oh, so I'm starting. Okay.
Are you starting here? Or?
Okay, so Flo introduces me to the other couple at the table, Yannick and Andrea from Wittlich. They beam at me and offer me their hands. Yannick's mouth is slightly agape, which makes him come off as slightly retarded. His shoulder-length blonde hair is pulled back in a ponytail, probably so you can see his many earrings better. Both ears are full of them. He also has those tunnels in his ear like Flo, only his earlobes are gauged out wider. In a few years, both of them are going to be thoroughly ashamed of them. Or not, which is even worse. In addition to that, Yannick has both nostrils pierced and a snake tattoo in his arm. His black Motorhead shirt looks like one of ththose bootlegged ones Yolanda's friend Luca prints in his basement and hawks online for horrendous prices. Miser? Awesome name, Yannick says, stuffing a piece of speck goat in his mouth, chewing like a camel. My God, it can't be that fucking hard to chew with your mouth closed, can it? His girlfriend Andrea is skinny, but has pretty chubby cheeks. Maybe the dentist forgot a few cotton swabs in her mouth during her last visit. Or maybe all of her wisdom teeth just got pulled. Above her cheekbones sit a pair of wide, open, bulging eyes. as if an invisible person was standing behind her, pulling her ponytail a tad too tight. "Hi, it's nice to meet you. We've heard so much about you." She's almost singing, with each syllable getting a little melody, giving her voice a whiny tone, somewhat droning, nagging.
I take over, and I must apologize for everything that follows. This is Mises' thinking. He's really literally insane now, and he's more or less paranoid, and he's really arrogant too. And he thinks he understands the world and understands people, and he can, he didn't even talk to them, but this is what he sees. Andrea is a teacher at high school in Wittlich. What else? Born to spend her entire life in schools. Kindergarten, school, college, school, retirement. Wonderful. I'm sure she was one of those typical nerds who always got good grades, but is unable to think even one interesting thought. A class president type. She earned her college degree in record time. Is that it?
Yeah, record, yep.
Since ambition is her middle name. I bet she has a piercing hidden somewhere, maybe her belly button, or a tattoo with Chinese lettering between her shoulder blades with some sort of message like Carpe Diem or Live Your Dream. She's interested in psychology and Tibet, and in the hallway of their constantly spotless, newly built flat she's been sharing with Yannick for 3 years, there's a framed poster of James Dean or Marilyn Monroe on the wall, maybe even a night scene of the Eiffel Tower or something by Amnesty International, chained hands, a screaming child, something like that. After all, protest is important as long as it stays civilized. Coats hung neatly in the wardrobe, shoes taken off before entering the apartment, cozy at home in slippers and comfy clothes, a bottle of good wine always on hand, and Italian breadsticks in case guests show up. Smoking is only permitted on the balcony, no shit. A few expensive photo books casually positioned on the flat glass table in the living room, CDs and DVDs neatly organized in the display case, a massive flat screen TV in the corner. Since Yannick is totally into movies, he thinks movies are really cool. His favorite director is Quentin Tarantino, his favorite actor is Robert De Niro, his favorite actress is the porn star Sasha Grey, but Andrea can't find out about that. Pornography is not allowed in this house, and even with regard to TV, she has a pretty critical stance. Well, I rarely ever put on the boob tube, a documentary here and there, but other than that. But if you ask, she'll admit, giggling, that she hasn't missed an episode of Marienhof in 5 years, and that once or twice a month she has a Sex and the City night with her girlfriends from school, who she calls her girlies, when the girlies really let loose, a totally crazed bunch, and the parents drop in pretty regularly. Two, they're so proud of their daughter. Andrea loves telling people that her mother is like a friend to her, a soulmate, and she gets along with her father as well. Sometimes they take a little peek into the study. That's Yanni's domain, Andrea then yells. She likes calling him Yanni, even though it's barely even shorter than Yannick. But pet names are important, and Yanni smiles at them from his huge executive armchair from which he surfs the World Wide Web, a Motorhead poster on the wall, which has caused more than one argument since Andrea heard that the singer is an awful womanizer, possibly even a Nazi. But Yannick put his foot down, it's his domain here, and he thinks Motorhead is really cool, though he only has one of their best off CDs, which he pretty much never listens to. But Lemmy is a real authentic rock and roller, a real character. Next to the printer is a guitar stand with a nice Gibson Les Paul, which once a month has a dust wipe off it. And the bedroom they really turned into quite the love nest. On the nightstands, pictures of them in loving poses. Most Sundays they eat breakfast in bed, even though it's really not any fun at all since the crumbs get everywhere. But neither of the two wants to question the whole ritual. It's just part of what they do, kind of like he always takes the top half of the roll and she takes the bottom half. It's just how it is. It's always been that way. And between two reheated rolls, Andrea asked him with a lusty look if she should spoil him a little bit right now. Without even the slightest bit of irony, they use terms like couples night and get it on and quality time. Sometimes they rub noses together. Each time Yannick would comment that that's how the Eskimos kiss. And Andrea always thought it to be so unbearably cute of him. But they don't do that much anymore. There's no paragraphs, it's really hard to read.
Just one sentence.
Yeah.
Keep going.
But at the same time, Yannick surprised her last year for her birthday and decked out the entire bathroom with candles and tea lights and roses strewn along the way leading there. Really romantic. Tough on the outside, soft on the inside, is what Andrea says about her Yanni. And every year they take out a new insurance policy, car, life, old age, you never know, etc. Andrea always says it's an old habit from the classroom. And sometimes he imitates her, she can't stand that, just like he can really hit the roof when she corrects him in front of people, or when she calls out in the supermarket, "Don't you need a new toothbrush, my love?" They always fight while shopping. Most recently when Yannick wanted to buy a doormat with the saying, "Shit, not you again," which would have been too embarrassing for Andrea in front of the neighbors, they wound up settling for one with the saying, "VIP lounge," like at the Ahrens. They thought that was really funny. Then Andrea found these really cute potholders in the shape of toadstools, which now hang on a shelf in the kitchen, ship-shaped form, their kitchen, they've got everything they need there, and Andrea can whip up a really killer veggie quiche. Cooking is her hobby, she can really unwind doing it, with a good CD playing, candles lit and a glass of wine, that's her little word. "I could die for a quiche," Yannick says, who himself is rather culinarily challenged, and just orders out when Andrea's not around, a pizza or something from the Chinaman, where he then places the fortune cookie sayings on Andrea's pillow, since that's where they first kissed, at a date in the Chinese restaurant Lotus, when Andrea found the saying, "He who takes no chances never wins," in a fortune cookie, which could only mean that she could take this guy home, while Yannick's fortune said, "Eyes are the mirror of the soul," which in Andrea's case suggested quite a huge soul. And they both leaned in to kiss at the same time. That was 3 years ago. They tell that story at every fitting or unfitting moment. And now, post-it notes on the fridge, reminding each other about dentist appointments or to take out the trash. Maybe even a little chalkboard where she draws him little hearts, and one time he drew a little penis. 3 little hills, the middle one the tallest. She chuckled and smacked him playfully on the arm and said, "Hey, you pig," and quickly erased it, whereupon they tickled each other and rolled around on the fluffy flocati in the bedroom. He wanted to sleep with her, but she still had so much to get done. Lesson plans. "Later, my naughty little piggy," she said, kissing him on the tip of the nose, but later they just fell asleep. Doesn't matter, he already jerked off in front of the computer earlier while she was in the shower. Sasha Grey is so hot. Hopefully, Andrea never catches him doing it. He meticulously erases his browser's history whenever he visits a porn site. He's really careful in that regard, because Andrea can turn into a real psycho, like while driving, for example, when he points out to her that the windshield wipers are still on, even though it's not raining anymore. He hates it when the wipers squeak across the dry windshield. It's also not good for the blades, but she always hits the roof as soon as he says it. "Do you want to drive?" And then the whole discussion starts up again, which is why he doesn't even say anything anymore. Andrea can talk her ear off. Words are her weapon, and she loves using them. She has a ton of binders from her college days still on the bookshelf, above the manuals with titles like "I'm Talking," communicative pitfalls and how to get out of them. Also one on creative writing, since Andrea would just love to write her own book. She only has the vaguest idea that her novel, My Dull Life in Wittlich, wouldn't exactly fly off the shelves, but she has time. She still has a whole life ahead of her, and her job keeps her busy enough. She really buckles down. She doesn't want to become one of those cynical teachers, but one with dedication and great ideas. And with Yannick, it's not like it was on the first day, but you can't really expect that anyway. Oh well, his loud chewing really gets a goat sometimes. And the fact that he grinds his teeth when he's had a bit to drink, he drinks too much in general sometimes, and his dumb habit of waiting until the gas light appears to get gas, and how he always has a go at her that she can go ahead and turn off the windshield wipers, sometimes just 5 seconds after it stopped raining. That typical male smart aleck attitude really ticks her off. She could have just married Joe Rogan, but there's always going to be a few differences, and all in all, she'll never find someone better than him in life. So there's really no reason to complain, and each of them has a goofy toothbrush holder in the bathroom, a smirking little red devil for her, holding the toothbrush like a spear, a Bart Simpson toothbrush cup for him. They gave them to each other for Valentine's Day. Both had the same silly idea, pure coincidence, maybe telepathy, true love in any case. And sorry again, everyone that's ever been in a long-term relationship must recognize themselves somewhere. I mean, there's a few things from of course, a lot of things from me. I have this toothbrush thing, this spear holding thing, and 2 or 3 other things too.
I think most people can definitely connect with at least an instance of that 3-page sentence.
That's fantastic. All right, any other questions? Any answers?
I have one. So if you hated the character Miser, you were really having a difficult time with him, how did you stay with that and not kind of turn him into this hero at the end? How did you stay in that place? Because I thought that was really great.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a good question. You really have to stick to your idea of what you want to do, even if it gets on your nerves. And I had the luxury to be able to put it aside, and I didn't write it on a date to be released. So I could put it aside and then get back to it when I felt annoyed by him. Also, I mean, the very last chapter in the book, I found it we won't spoil that for tonight for the ones who maybe want to read the book, but a lot of people said that it has a happy ending. Is that how you say it? That something sexual? No. Okay.
I really do appreciate your grasp of the English language. It's impressive. And all the nuances.
Yeah. And a lot of people found the ending sad. So, I mean, so that's what I like, of course. I mean, that it's a different book to different people who read it, and I thought there was hope at the end of the book, and when he's not the same anymore as he is when 5 days before.
Yeah.
A lot of people thought it would got even more depressing.
I think it's important to say too that 5 days. I mean, so much happens in just those 5 days.
Well, there's a lot of looking back on the travels.
So the core of it is 5 days, and that's something that always really interested me too. Is just to keep it so tight and so much change, but also there are, I don't know, not a lot of change in some ways, but it's up to the reader to decide. So I think that really fascinated me too.
And we have copies for purchase up here, and you'll sign them.
Of course, I'd be happy to. Well, I want to say thanks, Nicolaia, for being here. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, McNally-Jackson for the opportunity to do this here. It's, as I said, it's the first night of our reading tour. We have 7 more dates on the East Coast, and but this is the first night. And it's always I sometimes do reading tours with English authors or Scottish authors in Germany. Like I always tour with John Niven, and I used to tour twice with Irvin Welsh, and I did a tour with Mr. Justin Carter, who's in the audience tonight, and I did this one thing with I had this series, but it's really nice for me. It's the other way around. And also, like with John Niven, it's always the first night is always in Berlin, and it's the first night. You still have to get into it, and of course he always flies into Berlin, so Berlin is always the first night. And I always say to our publisher, like, can we do it somewhere else? But, like, same here. I thought like, wow. I mean, I have a show in New York. If someone would have told me that when I was 13 years old or 15 years old, or maybe even 2 years ago, and then it's the first night of the tour. But thanks, it's been great fun for me.
I just want to echo his words and say one more time, thank you to McNally-Jackson, and I believe it's like next Saturday or something. It's like small bookstore day, but as dumb as it sounds, every day is small bookstore day. One of the places we're doing a reading in Philadelphia, awesome bookstore, just announced they're closing down. And I mean, you guys are here for a reason. Small bookstores are awesome. They really are. I mean, there's nothing wrong with getting books elsewhere, but I mean, if I can get my little 2 cents in there and say keep supporting places like this who put on events like this, I mean.
My favorite bookstore in Hamburg has a big sign in their door saying, Yes, dear neighbors, yes, we do take your parcels, but we don't do Amazon anymore.
Yeah.
We don't take the parcels. You buy the books on Amazon and you pick them up at our place. You get that.
Yeah. So thanks once again for everyone coming out, and thank you, McNally-Jackson.
And